Good morning. Thanks so much for the folks who have taken the time out of their busy schedules to attend our next CPG Unpacked, in which we are talking about all things non-GMO project. So I just really wanted to take a moment to thank my fellow panelists. It feels like a bit of a panel today. We have, well, I'm going to introduce myself and then I'm going to let you gentlemen introduce yourselves too. My name's Ashley. I'm one of the founding members here of Social Nature, in which we help natural brands win at retail through our digital sampling rebate platform. Let me also introduce you to Adam. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey, so my name's Adam Deremo. I'm co-founder of a company called Awake Chocolate. We're sort of the OG brand in functional chocolate. Each of our bite-sized chocolate pieces has 50 milligrams of caffeine in it, so it gives you a little bit of extra boost of energy to help you get through the day and taste delicious as well.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much for joining, Adam. You are one of our favorite clients on the platform for sure. Sam, how about you go next?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Sam. I'm the business development specialist here at the Non-GMO Project. So I work with brands that are looking to get products verified and help talk to them about what that process looks like and what some of the value is that you can see from getting verified.
Love it. Thanks, Sam. And how about you, Hans?
Yeah, so I'm Hans Eisenbeis. I'm a director of mission and messaging here at the project. We're based just south of you all up in Vancouver. You at Social Nature in Bellingham, Washington. So we share a bioregion in the Pacific Northwest, which we love a lot. My role at the project is I oversee a number of things, including a lot of our research. So we look at sales numbers for sure across the natural products industry. We're watching for trends there, but we also do pretty deep dive research on what I would call shopper insights. Why do people buy what they choose to buy? What's motivating them? What are their values? So I spend a lot of time thinking about what makes a natural food, for example, and conducting the research to kind of support that. And ultimately, I guess, just one of our storytellers at the project, tell the story of how the non-GMO project came to be, what we're thinking about doing next, why we do what we do, that type of thing. And certainly being supportive of brands like Awake Chocolate, who have made a commitment that aligns with our mission as a nonprofit, which is protecting a non-GMO food supply.
Amazing. Well, you alluded to my first question, which is just that. Maybe we can kind of take a step back and introduce who the Non-GMO Project is, how long you guys have been functioning. I'd also be curious to know kind of what did the GMO supply chain look like before the Non-GMO Project? Like, it's kind of cool to like understand the before and now. Maybe let's start there.
Yeah, I can jump in with a little bit about who the Non-GMO Project is, and then Hans, if you want to kind of cover what that landscape looked like prior. But just to start, the Non-GMO Project is a nonprofit organization focused on rigorous product verification and providing education that helps people make informed choices about what they eat. So we operate on some core beliefs, like we think everyone deserves to know what's in our food and should have access to non-GMO options. We also believe that shopping choices have power, and then when we collectively choose certain products, we can actually influence how our food is grown and produced. One of our main goals at the project is preserving and building up the non-GMO supply chain. We see this as a crucial step towards ensuring future generations have non-GMO food options available to them. We're also concerned about protecting our diverse genetic inheritance, which we believe is fundamental to environmental health. We also see our verification as something that supports organic and regenerative agriculture by reducing GMO contamination and protecting non-GMO seed supplies. So we're really positioning ourselves as part of the broader movement toward a sustainable food system. And the first products that earned the butterfly seal reached the marketplace in early 2010, and we've been growing steadily since then. Today, we have over 62,000 products that are verified, and that represents over $47 billion in annual sales of verified products. And then Hans, if you want to cover a little bit of the history.
I'll provide a little bit of the context. I mean, the reason the Non-GMO Project got started is because shoppers were hearing about how ubiquitous GMOs were. And all you had to do is open your eyes if you drove across, the Midwest in either Canada or the US, and you saw these huge monocrops of corn and soybeans in particular. And at that time, the USDA itself estimated that about 70 or 80% of groceries, especially processed packaged foods, contained GMO derivatives, likely from either corn or soy. So the project started because shoppers were going into stores saying, how do I know whether this product contains GMO derivatives or not? And the answer to that was, you don't know, right? And so Megan, our founder, was actually working in a co-op in Southern California, and she had this idea. And also, I should say, at that time, shopper activism was really demanding GMO labeling, right? First from state governments, and then ultimately in the federal government to say, hey, we need some mechanism for determining what's in our food. And California, Vermont, and Colorado, other states had state level sort of legal activists trying to get GMOs labeled. But Megan, our founder, sort of had the brilliant idea, well, why don't we just create an opt-in program where we will certify non-GMO foods? Y'all else can just kind of take care of yourself, but we are actually going to create a marketplace for non-GMO foods. So we're going to write a standard. We're going to establish laboratory testing procedures where needed. We're going to keep an eye on what's happening in biotech to see where new GMOs are being created. And we're going to, commit to staying on top of that. And so that was really the motivation for what got us started on this path. Just knowing that our food system, in broad strokes, is really broken in meaningful ways. One of the main ways in which it is broken is this commitment to huge GMO monocrops of corn and soy in particular. And so the happy effect of having launched this certification to help shoppers is that the whole industry had to kind of shift gears, and the light bulb goes off, right? And says, wow, there's a pretty significant number of shoppers who are looking to avoid GMOs. Maybe we should change our supply chains, right? And encourage more non-GMO agriculture. So that's a little long-winded answer for you, Ashley, but
no, I love it. It's fascinating. And I'm curious to know, Adam, what does being non-GMO verified mean to Awake? Like, was that something that you intentionally, like, you knew this was going to be an easy certification for you to apply to? Because I will say that when I looked through our client list, I was actually surprised to see that many were not non-GMO certified. So I'm curious to know, was that intentional of you folks here at Awake?
Yeah, so good question. We have 4 guiding beliefs that we use to operate our business. And one of those is that we're obsessed over ingredients. And that has 2 parts. One, we believe that there's no such thing as good enough. We will, if we see an opportunity to make our product better, we will. And then the second thing is, in all cases, we use the simplest ingredients we can find. And in our opinion, the idea of non-GMO certification is really closely aligned to simplicity, right? Just the more something is doctored with or changed over time, the less simple it is. And so we also knew that some of our consumers were interested in non-GMO. So it was something that we wanted to do. We explored whether or not it was possible for us to have some of our products certified, or all of them. It turned out that it was. And so on everything that we reasonably could certify, we've moved forward. And we've been committed to that for, well, 6 or 7 years now.
That's awesome. And kudos, because like I said, I noticed that many brands didn't necessarily have GMOs in their ingredients, but hadn't gone the extra step of the verification. So that's amazing. One of the things that also came up on the expo room floor, and it's one of my favorite questions. So, and this was just this past expo. So is there, from your perspective, Sam and Hans, is there a room for GMOs in the landscape? And the context that it came up in this particular conversation for me was that it was a dairy brand, and their belief was that the GMOs helped lessen their carbon footprint. So, of course, like anything in the natural space, this is not a black and white answer, but why not dive into the nuances of what and why of like when to use a GMO? Does it ever make sense to you from your perspective? Curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, that's a good challenging question. And I often think about for myself in my life, what limits and cautions do I have around uses of technology? And we all make use of technology for better and for worse in a lot of cases, right? And so we can look at something like the connection between agriculture and climate change, for example. Agriculture is one of the top three contributors to climate change, and ask ourselves how can we do food better, right? Our belief is really that GMOs are at the core of an industrialized agricultural system that really has maximized yields and in the interest of minimizing cost to shoppers. And what that's really done is that it's externalized a lot of costs. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if you just think about, as Adam was saying, the simplicity of non-GMO versus the complexity of genetically engineered food. In many cases where there isn't really need or demand for GMOs, in large part, the first generation of GMOs was designed specifically to make it more convenient for farmers to grow their food and increase their yields. There was no real benefit to shoppers at the other end of the spectrum. In fact, what they were getting is lower nutrient density in their foods, and crops like corn and soy that were grown in increasingly depleted soils because of their GMO nature, the nature of GMO farming. So I think that is a question we all kind of have to ask ourselves. What are the meaningful limits and cautions we should take with technologies? I think we all love having a little computer in our pocket that can both call friends and text enemies and have access to all the knowledge ever been collected on the planet right there at our fingertips, but also recognize that there are some real limits to that type of technology. Our organization is obviously built around trying to draw a line in the sand, as it were, between genetically modified foods and non-GMO foods. And it's just our view that we want to protect the corner of the market that a lot of shoppers and a lot of farmers have an interest in protecting.
Love that. And that is interestingly, it just to speak to like the industrialization of it all, right? So like I think everyone can appreciate that simple is best on a lot of fronts. Curious to know, also from your perspective too, Adam, like how do retailers view the non-GMO project? Because it is true that you can, like I said, a lot of our clients were positioned as non-GMO on packaging, even though they weren't necessarily certified. So that was like a bit of an aha moment for me, even as a consumer. So I'm curious to know, like, how much is that happening and how much do retailers care? Like, curious to know from your perspective, Adam, is the fact that you're non-GMO certified like a favorable in the eyes of retailers as you're pitching new products?
Yeah, you know what? It's a really good question. My first instinct is I don't think it's a one size fits all answer. I think there are certain retailers who really are focused on it and certain retailers who are not. In my personal experience interacting with buyers, I would say that non-GMO versus, no certification or no claim, they look at it kind of like consumers do. It's an obvious cue to overall product quality, and all things being equal, I think they would always choose the item that is non-GMO. But like I said, we've seen a pretty broad spectrum of, let's say, intensity of opinion around that, and it's definitely not a one size fits all answer.
How about for you guys?
I was just going to add that we oftentimes retailers, especially in the natural space, will have purchasing policies. Some are more rigorous than others, as Adam's saying. One thing that really boosted our visibility in the natural products industry was Whole Foods back in 2018. They basically said, we're not going to allow self-made claims. So if your packaging says that you're non-GMO, but you don't have a third-party verification, we're not going to allow that product in the store. So either take away the self-made claim or go, get yourself certified and verified. They're doing the same thing, by the way, with regenerative claims, right? Regenerative is kind of a hot new term. In reality, with some substance, it actually means a pretty meaningful shift in agriculture. And so certifications play a really important role in putting limits on what we all now call greenwashing, right? So you can make all kinds of claims on your packaging, but if they're not backed up with a third-party independent certification, they are just that. And we think shoppers are just really pretty savvy about that. They're pretty savvy about the empty language of an all-natural product, and they're going to be looking at ingredient panels, for example, to see how that kind of self-made claim is supported by the evidence, right? So shoppers are just super savvy about greenwashing. They'd rather have no claim at all than a claim that isn't backed up with some evidence and backed up with some commitment on the part of the brand. And we see that as I mean, in the broad strokes, both retailers and shoppers see certifications as the shortcut to trust, right? This brand has opened up their books, they've shared their secret formulas and their recipes with an independent third party, in many cases like our own, a nonprofit. And that really represents vulnerability, frankly, and a vulnerability that they pass with flying colors with the certification, and shoppers, I think, appreciate that. So.
And question on that front from a retailer perspective, because I think one of the biggest use cases here at Social Nature is brands are using the platform to expand beyond natural and into like the Targets and Walmarts of the world. It's no secret that Target and Walmarts are seemingly making a play for the better for you space. Question on from your perspective. Whole Foods, I agree, was like the first retailer to like really create some demands on brands for the certifications, certainly before the acquisition. Are you only seeing that expectation from natural retailers, or are you finding that conventional retailers are also like appreciating the certification?
I'm happy to jump in there.
Yeah, anyone? Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation. I mean, I think we know from the sales numbers, Walmart and Costco are the two biggest in terms of volume retailers of organic and natural foods. But that, of course, is largely a volume story and not, it's a depth of volume story, not a breadth of coverage story. And the way we talk about that internally here is we have sort of what we would think of as being really mission aligned retailers that are really trying to change food systems and service shoppers who want to participate in shifting a food system to a better system. And then we've got major retailers who recognize the market opportunity, right? So we know that about 40% of all shoppers in North America, Canada, and the US would consider themselves natural shoppers. In other words, they're going to grocery stores and on a fairly regular basis making a connection between their own personal health, the health of the planet. How can I do better in what I'm buying for my family? Looking at organic, looking at non-GMO, looking at regenerative. So that's a pretty significant marketplace. And by the way, that's aging down in a really interesting way, right? So Gen Z shoppers are turning out to be the greenest shoppers of all, and they're thinking the most holistically about what better food actually means. Better for themselves, yes, but better for their communities, better for the planet writ large. So that's how I would answer that question in terms of different retailers taking a different approach. It's a significant market, right? And you can go to your local gas station and you're going to find some organic options. You're going to find some non-GMO options, especially in the snack space. Awake, I don't know what your distribution is looking like in gas stations, but I imagine there's, pretty significant market there too. The thing is natural shoppers are kind of expecting to find natural products wherever they shop. In fact, and they do shop very eclectically, whether it's gas stations, even dollar stores, if you can believe that, and their local co-op and the occasional trip to Costco.
We definitely
Yeah.
do that. Like sort of the emergence of natural from, let's say, segregated stores, co-ops, Whole Foods, et cetera, that sold exclusively those items to a store within a store. So, larger grocery chains allocating space in their store dedicated to these items to now, I don't even know how many retailers that we call on and deal with who just have lots of what you would consider natural product integration in all of their product sets. So I think your point there is bang on, and it totally speaks to how preference for natural items is growing, and like at some point, I think it won't even be looked at as anything that's anything less than expected. Like everything should be as natural and as good for you and the environment as it can be.
Yeah. So my question is, why aren't all brands non-GMO certified? And also maybe for you, Adam, how difficult was it to get the certification?
So I wouldn't say it was terribly difficult to get non-GMO verified. It also wasn't super easy. It was like partly an exercise in documentation collection and just like thinking about how we keep track of all of the documents we get from our suppliers. But it was also partly a process of ingredient selection. Like we had to find certain ingredients that we couldn't get on a verified basis previously and switch to those things. It's a bit of an intimidating process, honestly, when you first set out on the journey. But I will say this: the non-GMO project team was really good to work with and made it as easy as it could be for us to get verified. And ever since we have been, all of the maintenance and annual renewal and recertification work has been super easy. So, from the perspective of a brand owner, I'm glad that we did it. And I'm glad that there's a balance between making sure the process is rigorous enough to ensure it means something, but also user-friendly enough not to scare away brands like us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then from the non-GMO team, what's your thoughts on why more brands aren't getting non-GMO certified? Because like I said, there was quite a few brands that I came across that I assumed that were certified, but they were more self-made claims. So is it just a matter of like, we're in the weeds, we're gonna get there, and there's other priorities that are taking precedent, or what's your thought process there?
Yeah, I can speak to this a little. Speaking with brands every day, one of the most common concerns that I hear from brands that haven't jumped into the process or are hesitant about jumping into the process is kind of what Adam spoke to. They're worried about the complexity, the paperwork burden, how far back in their supply chain they're going to have to go to prove that their ingredients are non-GMO. And I think one thing that's really nice about non-GMO certification is it is a single issue certification. So we're really concerned with GMOs. We're looking for high risk GMO ingredients in your product. And I think with that, a lot of brands, once they get into that initial process of talking to technical administrators, start to realize that a lot of their ingredients or even a lot of their products aren't in that high risk category. And those ones can be a lot easier to verify, actually. So
is it easier than maybe some brands assume? Like, that's good to know. Like,
yeah, so I look at it as like going two different ways. We have what we call high risk ingredients, and those are ones we're really concerned with. So that's going to be things like corn, canola, soy, and animal derived ingredients is another one. So like milk and dairy products, and those are considered high risk because they're highly likely to be genetically modified and also widely commercially available in the marketplace. So if your product has those are the ingredients we're going to look at with a lot more scrutiny. So that's where sometimes testing can become involved, and facility inspections may be required. And on the other hand, if you don't have those high risk ingredients, it can often be a lot easier to prove that they're compliant with our non-GMO project standard.
that's good to know.
One point in that area, and it kind of parallels what we talked about with the proliferation of retailer acceptance, consumer interest in non-GMO. I was pleasantly surprised at the level of knowledge and the documentation that was already in place in the supplier community. So when we decided to get certified, I didn't know how difficult it would be to get the information we needed from our suppliers, and we work with a lot of them. And I was pleasantly surprised that most of them already had all of the documentation that was needed. And if they didn't, they understood the issue and were willing to work with us on getting what was required to be verified.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. I mean, Sam and his team in business development have really been slowly trying to work their way up the supply network, as it were, and move earlier into the supply network and actually verify ingredient providers and producers and sellers. And that ultimately can make it so much easier and lower expense to an end user as a brand, right? Looking for that consumer-facing retail mark.
Yeah, I can imagine as a manufacturer, I mean, like you said, it's interesting to say that like, as you're thinking of kind of how to manufacture your product best, having those suppliers that already are kind of non-GMO certified or aware from the get-go, I imagine would save a brand a lot of money as they go to market, just like with new product launches and whatnot. What my question, I guess, for you all is, at what stage do you recommend brands start thinking of this or any certification in their go-to-market manufacturing strategy?
Yeah, I think if they have the opportunity and to start thinking about it while they're doing product formulation, that's the best place to start, like right at the beginning. Like Hans said, we've been working really hard to get more inputs and ingredients verified. So like in that example I just gave of those high-risk ingredients, if a brand opted to work with a non-GMO Project Verified high-risk ingredient, it means that that ingredient supplier has already done that necessary testing and inspections on your behalf. And so it will save the brand a ton of time and paperwork burden if they actually source non-GMO verified inputs and ingredients. And we do have a non-GMO inputs and ingredient finder on our website that brands can use. And that's where I send regularly brands that are looking to finish up their formulations with verified ingredients.
Very cool. Okay, how about this? So look back or looking forward, because I know you guys have some exciting announcements to make on the label certification front, but maybe we can first start with like, what are some future trends that you think are happening just in general in the certification landscape? And then would love to kind of give you the floor to talk about your new certification.
Yeah, well, I can speak a little bit to, broader trends that we're seeing. Obviously, I mentioned regenerative a few times, and that really seems to be gaining traction. There's some challenges there in the certification space, depending on the rigor of the standard, right? So we're all sort of in agreement that we don't want the term regenerative to be the new sustainable, where you just, you can use it in almost any sustainability context. And in fact, some of the largest, multinational food corporations are starting to understand that there's some marketing value to using the term regenerative. So the certification community is working really hard to establish, as Adam, I think, referred to before, meaningful standards that actually mean something, but that are also somewhat achievable. And I think in the regenerative space, that achievability is turning out to be a real challenge because we really do have to go all the way back to the farm. And it's a cliche that I often trot out. It's like, if you know one farm, you know one farm. Every farm is a little bit different. What's regenerative on one farm might not look quite the same on another farm. So we expect regenerative to continue to gain traction as shoppers get educated more about what that actually means, what the certifications mean, and all the value propositions. It's one of the best value propositions of all. It's making a direct connection between how your food is grown and climate change, right? So we're talking about sequestering carbon in healthy soils with crop rotations, with meaningful rotational grazing. There's, it's a whole system, right? A very holistic system of making food better. So that, I think, is one of the most exciting. And then there are some other really interesting areas, like Upcycled has made some impact over the last 5 or 6 years, a new certification to try to really redirect the waste stream from food production back into food production and sort of establish the highest use for a waste product that comes from a process around manufacturing food. I think that's super exciting. I think the world is really ready for more meaningful and more mindful sustainability in the packaging space. There are some real barriers to that, legal and regulatory and otherwise, about how food is legally required to be packaged in a wide variety of plastics, for example. So I think there's some challenges to that shift happening, but I do expect to see some meaningful progress on biodegradables and compostables in the packaging space. And then maybe I'll kick it over to Sam if you want to mention the thing that our next big thing at the project.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we had a big exciting announcement at Expo this year and a little launch party for our new verification, which is going to be the non-UPF verification. So it's non-ultra processed foods. I don't know if you all have seen, but there's been a lot of excitement around this topic in mainstream media, especially this year. It's something that consumers are starting to definitely be concerned with, and it's something that we feel is necessary at the Non-GMO Project. Yeah, and so we're going to be looking at ultra processing. Right now, we're in the process of writing the standard for that. So just like the Non-GMO Project standard, we're working on this comprehensive document that balances rigor and achievability. And we have a pilot program running right now with a bunch of brands that are helping us to write that standard, as well as industry experts and food scientists. And if you want to learn more about it or join the waitlist, you can at nonupf.org. But we're planning to hopefully launch that in the fall. So it's going to be coming soon.
Cool. I think Brand's gonna be very excited about that.
Yeah, I will say, I mean, part of, I think it's right in line with our values as an organization, the commitment that we made to non-GMO, just not shifting focus, but adding to our scope of interest. The UPF issue is quite interesting, but to do that, we've been co-creating what we're calling a collective, what we call a food integrity collective, which is just a lot of interesting visionaries in the food industry to look at a framework for really fixing our food system. And so that food integrity collective has looked at processing and kind of determined, wow, it would be really great to have a certification around minimal processing. Also looking at the mindful packaging question, looking at animal welfare issues, looking at water issues, looking at social and economic equity issues and sustainability issues, fair trade issues. I know that Adam, you at Awake are fair trade certified as well. So just taking that much more holistic view of what a better food system looks like in collaboration with other thought leaders and visionaries in the food industry to kind of look for these little points of intervention that might be necessary that we or someone else really could step into. And we have a lot of great friends and colleagues in the certification space, whether it's upcycled or regenerative or the organic community. And we've always said we believe certifications really are support one another. We're not competing with each other. We're actually competing against the system in a meaningful way. So,
Adam, do you plan on getting UPF certified?
Well, I think we'll have to find out what the standard is first. But definitely it would be a point of interest for us.
Amazing. Any like quick, like just like if brands were interested in UPF certification, is there like any from the non-GMO team, anything that Sam, like we like that you're looking for? I know you mentioned that like dairy can be hard with non-GMO. How about for the UPF certification?
Yeah, so we're really still in the process of developing that standard, and we're taking into consideration some other non-UPF kind of scoring systems that are out there, like the Nova score. But we're really aiming to strike that balance between rigor and achievability. And so with that, there's a lot to consider. I mean, it's going to be easy for like simple products. I think it goes back to what Adam said about simplicity. Like the least processing you have, that product should be really easy to get verified. And then there will be some gray space in the middle, which I think is what we're really working to figure out with our pilot program and that development of that standard.
Amazing.
I think our dream, and I've heard, others on our team working on this, the dream is that ultimately you'll be able to, just as today you can walk down any aisle at the grocery store and find non-GMO verified, we're hoping that a non-UPF verification system will be equally as accessible across food categories. And we're approaching it with that optimism that we think, some minor tweaks in supply chains and processing, that a non-UPF standard doesn't have to be that hard, given the global health, polydemics that are really a part of our bad diet globally, the bad Western diet that's about 70% ultra processed foods, and the pandemics of obesity and anxiety and pre-diabetes and so forth. We think there's a real good case to be made for launching that meaningful and achievable new standard. And Sam, I think, mentioned the website. I'll mention it again. If you're interested in learning more about what we're doing, or you want to kind of get into the conversation, that's I believe it's non-UPF-verified.org.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. We did a recent study amongst our community, because Social Nature actually represents the largest community of Better For You digital shoppers. And it was very interesting to see that above certification is folks are interested in health goals. So and the health goals are much more holistic, like sleep better, finding calm, those kind of things. That was top. But also on the very top of that was just simple ingredients. And I think that every shopper is just craving being able to shop intuitively. And it sounds like that this UPF certification just sounds like that. It's like they just want to be able to know that this is a good product for their families, and not think about all of the jargon that sometimes can come along with any food industry marketing. So before we let you all go, Adam, because all registrants get 500 free activations to use on the Social Nature platform, I'd love to just take a moment to what was your what and why for why you use Social Nature? Because I think that context always really helps brands know when and why to use Social Nature. So curious to know from your perspective, what was kind of the trigger event for you?
I think it was twofold. I mean, first, you all have invested a lot of time and effort building the platform and building the community that uses it, right? So just as a practical matter for a brand, it's a great way to reach people who are concerned with, let's say, better product quality, simpler ingredients, products they can trust. On the other hand, we were also looking for ways that we could, in a targeted manner, drive trial in store. And so the thing that we really love about Social Nature is the redemption mechanic for trial also helps grow velocity in stores. So for us, it satisfies two objectives: reach consumers who would be interested in a product like Awake, and also just help seed the behavior of purchasing our product in store and driving trial.
You're hired. I could not have said it better myself. Okay, any lasting thoughts before I let you continue on your day? It's been a lovely conversation. I think it's one of those that we could talk for hours, but I really appreciate everyone's input. It's really cool to see from the project's perspective and the brand's perspective. So I appreciate your all's attendance and attention and thoughtful combos. And thanks so much for today.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.